Hey guys, welcome back to the Hands-On channel. I'm glad you stopped by. I wanted to talk to you today about something that I've been researching this topic for many years. I mean, like at least 2 decades, maybe going on 3 decades that I've been looking into a lot of this stuff. Because whenever I see something that raises my eyebrow, I'm like, hey, I should look into this and like research it more. And of course, with the the invention of the internet and all of that, that's made it a lot easier for us to kind of go through and find information from different sources that may not be the mainstream sources, but nevertheless, they're true. And I want to talk to you about the words we use. I think it's very important that we don't use the words that the mainstream media and the people that are in charge right now, the Orwellian-minded people that are in charge right now, are trying to direct us to use. And one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot is conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist. So if you dare question the government, basically, you're labeled a conspiracy theorist. And we'll get to toward the end of the video, we're going to talk about the origin of conspiracy theory and how it came about and, how they weaponized it, the term, against free-thinking people, free-thinking, reasonable people that just want to find out what the truth is, right? So anyhow, we got to be careful about that stuff because words offer the means to meaning. And for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And what is that truth? That truth is our system is collapsing. Our system is being collapsed. It's not just collapsing on its own, like an old car that, gets too worn out and you just can't drive it anymore. It's not like that. They're actually, these deep state people are the gremlins that are undoing the lug nuts and cutting the brake lines and pulling the spark plug wires out and making it to where our vehicle is not going to be able to go forward anymore in the future. So we're going to cover 9 so-called conspiracy theories that actually turned out to be true. So let's get into this. I'm going to need, first of all, my anti-communist They Live glasses so that I can see through all of the fear and propaganda. But let's get into this. Have you ever heard of the bad booze conspiracy? I was kind of surprised how few people knew about this. So this is way back in the day during Prohibition. The government, the U.S. government, the federal government, poisoned alcohol to keep people from drinking. So you'll remember from the history books and stuff, there was this time in, dark time in American history where the government decided, oh, we know what's best for you. You can't drink. And they banned alcohol, right? Well, here's the truth of what happened. The crazy conspiracy theories almost always suggest the government is behind it all. And they were right again. Manufacturers of industrial alcohol had been mixing their product with dangerous chemicals for years prior to Prohibition. But between 1926 and 1933, the federal government pushed manufacturers to use stronger poisons to discourage bootleggers from turning the alcohol into moonshine. And of course, that didn't stop the bootleggers or their customers. And by the end of Prohibition, more than 10,000 Americans had been killed by the tainted booze. So there you go. I mean, limiting alcohol is a health advice that, doctors should be giving, not the federal government. So the reason I bring this one up is it kind of is reminiscent of the stuff we just went through with the mandate thing and all this. It's not their business to tell us what to do with our own health. That's part of having liberty, right? And the ability to choose what you want to do with your body and your time on this earth. So the next conspiracy theory that turned out to be true here. This is a big one, a really big one. And we've got it summarized down so that the video's not too long. But the government mind control conspiracy. It's a fact. They did it. The CIA was testing LSD and other hallucinogenic drugs on Americans in a top secret experiment on behavior modification. So here's the truth behind that. The program was known as MK Ultra, and it was real. The CIA started by using volunteers. The novelist Ken Kesey was one of the notable subjects. But the program heads soon began dosing people without their knowledge. So MK Ultra, it left many victims permanently and mentally disabled. So, it's a big deal. It also ties into the Manchurian Candidate idea of being able to control people's thoughts and their minds and make them do different things. Oh, I don't know, like what? Like, I don't know, maybe a school shooting or something like that. And, I have no proof that that's going on. But when I see the history here of how they have been manipulating people using LSD and other mind-altering, hallucinogenic drugs, it's very possible. It's very possible. I mean, is it a coincidence that many of these mass shooters have been on psychotropic drugs? Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. So next up here, the government is spying on you. So here's the conspiracy. With the advances in technology, the government is using its vast resources to track citizens. And I remember back in the 90s, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And so I remember growing up in the 90s, hearing all about this when cell phones and other things were starting to come on the scene, especially in the early 2000s. You started hearing more and more about people saying, hey, this phone is tracking me, you know. And I've told my wife before, sometimes we'll be in the living room or something having a conversation, and then suddenly later on, you know, maybe I want to buy some product or something, right? Like, you know, I want to go buy a widget or whatever. Well, later on, either on Facebook or on Google, when I search for something, one of the first things that will come up will be that widget that I'm looking for. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think that's paranoia. I think something is, you know, picking up on keywords. And basically, it's sort of like Minority Report. They know how to cater to you. So as you walk by in Minority Report, the advertisement scans your eyes and it goes, oh, I'm going to target this advertising at this particular person. And I think that's what we're on the infancy stages of that right now. So it's not fully accepted or adopted so it's not been fully implemented yet, but I think that's what they're working on. And so it's not a coincidence. Let me know down in the comments, has that ever happened to you? Have you been having a private conversation before and then suddenly later on you're like looking through your social media or something and then there's an advertisement for that thing? And again, is that a coincidence or is there something else to this? So here's the truth. In 2016, government agencies sent 49,868 requests for user data to Facebook, 27,850 to Google, and 9,076 to Apple, according to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a major nonprofit organization that defends civil liberties in the digital world and advises the public on matters of internet privacy. You've probably also heard that your computer camera could be used to spy on you. Here's the real likelihood that there is a real likelihood that could be happening. Not only that, I remember several years ago when they came out with the smart TVs, right? It's going to be great. It's going to be a smart TV. They didn't tell people that they have a camera hidden away inside of there, like a webcam, and so they can look around and see what's going on in your living room, right? I mean, the privacy of your own home. This is extremely Orwellian. So next up, fake battle, real war. So the conspiracy is the Gulf of Tonkin incident on August 2nd, 1964 was fake to provoke American support for Vietnam War. So here's the truth. By the time the news reached the American ears, the facts surrounding the North Vietnamese attack on American naval ship Maddox were already fuzzy. Declassified intelligence documents have since revealed that the Maddox had provided support for South Vietnamese attacks on a nearby island, and that the North Vietnamese were responding in kind. Another thing while I'm flipping the page here that just came to my mind, interestingly enough, Jim Morrison of The Doors, his dad was the admiral or whatever you'd say, the head honcho on that boat, the Maddox, I believe it was, or he was definitely a part of it. So I've always found that very interesting. And I don't have this written down, but there's a whole nother thing called, oh man, I can never remember the name of that place. Laurel Canyon. Go look up Laurel Canyon. Some very, very interesting things have been said about Laurel Canyon. Now, we're not talking about it here because I can't prove that, but they claim that the CIA had an office there in Laurel Canyon, and that's where all the rock and roll superstars were at the time during the 60s, right? So like Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, The Doors, all of this, right? There were just tons of people, Frank Zappa, other people, the Beatles, all these people went there, and allegedly the CIA was giving them song lyrics to influence the culture. I mean, is that hard to believe when we're looking back and we're seeing what's going on now? Is that hard to believe? So anyways, back into the story here. The event opened up the floodgates for direct American military involvement in Vietnam. So can you imagine? I can't remember what the number is, but I've seen the Vietnam Wall one time in real life. I went to D.C. I went with my wife and her family up to DC, and we looked around, and I saw the Vietnam Wall, and I was just like, oh my God. I couldn't believe when you actually see something with all those names. I can't remember how many guys died in Vietnam, but it was atrocious, and it just sinks your heart. If you've got a patriotic thread of patriotism inside of your body and you see the Vietnam Wall, I mean, it's probably going to bring tears to your eyes just to see that much American sacrifice over what? A fake incident. Now, you could argue that we needed to go into Vietnam to fight the communists and stuff like that, and I'd have been more on board with that, but they didn't do that. They pretended that they got attacked so that we could start a war with Vietnam. And this is not the only time this has happened in history. There are some very interesting things about how, was it Roosevelt at the time? I can't remember. Yeah, I believe it was. He had the entire fleet of Navy vessels over at Pearl Harbor. So, I mean, was that intentional? Did they do that to make us a target so that it would pull us into World War II? I don't know. I mean, it's speculation here. I don't have proof of that, but I suspect that's what happened. So let's get into the next one that we can prove here. Operation Mockingbird. I mean, my God, guys. If there's one conspiracy theory that you need to look up and you need to research and you need to find out what these people have been doing, and they claim the program's over, but it never ends. When these people get control and power, they never relinquish that power. So Operation Mockingbird was a 1950s program in which the CIA recruited and propped up various media organizations to influence public opinion. In April 1976, the Church Committee, a U.S. Senate task force, conducted an investigation into the CIA's influence over both foreign and national news organizations and stated that the CIA maintained a huge global network that provided intel for their organization and at times attempted to influence opinion through the use of covert propaganda. At times, all the time. So when you see this stuff from the mainstream news and you wonder why they're all saying the exact same thing, I want you to remember Operation Mockingbird never ended. This story doesn't say that. I'm saying that. My personal belief is Operation Mockingbird never ended. They're still using it today. That's why the mainstream media is what it is. That's why they're in bed with the people that are trying to destroy the country. So this damning report also stated that these same individuals gave the CIA direct access to a large number of newspapers and periodicals, scores of press services and news agencies, radio and television stations, commercial book publishers, and other foreign media outlets. And they claim that approximately 50 of the CIA's assets were individual American journalists or employees of the U.S. media organizations. So there you go, guys. When you're looking at the news and you're seeing these talking heads saying the exact same thing, it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen these videos on YouTube where they say Operation Mockingbird is real. And they'll show these newscasters from all across the country saying exactly the same thing. And somebody has figured out how to time it together where it all overlaps, and it sounds like Legion. They are Legion. You know, they're liars. They're professional liars, and they're all saying the exact same thing that the CIA wants them to say at the time. So be warned, Operation Mockingbird is real, and I believe is still in effect today. So next up here, it's more about spying on people. NSA is spying on you, obviously. Remember they put up that giant compound over there to collect all their data? I believe that's in Utah, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of the locals out there have complained because they're using so much water to keep their supercomputers cooled down that it's actually taking water away from the local towns and things like that, and farmers and things like that. But you know, when they got that many terabytes or whatever of data coming in all at once off of your computer because they're spying on you, I mean, they got to cool that stuff down, right? So the NSA is basically storing and spying on everything sent across the internet. Everything. And it's not just the internet. It's your text messages, I'm convinced. It's your telephone calls. Back in the 80s, I remember this growing up. There were several news stories. I think even CBS did a news story on it. It was a project called Echelon. So basically what Echelon was an offshore data collection organization, I believe, set up by either the NSA before they were called the NSA or the CIA, right? And the idea was that if you said certain key phrases, your telephone conversation would be recorded. So let's say, one example was bomb, and I remember back in the 90s, that was kind of a saying, like, it's the bomb, right? It meant it was really good. Well, if you said that sort of stuff, your phone conversation was recorded. And so they've been doing this for a long time. They've shifted over into advanced technology because now they can get even more data out of you. So they're storing and spying on everything that's done on the internet. So Edward Snowden, who I think is a hero, a whistleblower, he came out and told us exactly how they were doing this. And then suddenly Google and others started encrypting all their inner server communications, and HTTPS was universally pushed hard because Google and others didn't want you to realize what they know. So they had to encrypt their stuff so you can't go in there and find out. So the NSA is spying on you. Why? I don't know. Maybe they're drumming up something. Maybe in the future they're going to get you for a crime that they haven't invented a law yet to nail you on, but in the future they will. It's just, this is completely Orwellian. Next up here, Operation Northwoods. And boy, this is a doozy as well. Operation Northwoods, the Joint Chief of Staff drew up and approved plans to create a terrorist act on the U.S. soil to drum up support for a war and invasion of Cuba in the 1960s. So they were just like, hey, how can we do this? How can we get the United States people on board with a war in Cuba? And so they had all these sinister plans, these evil plans to conduct terrorist acts on American people so that they could get themselves involved in this war that they wanted. The Hawks have been doing this, the War Hawks have been doing this for years and years, decades and decades. They know exactly how to get the American people to fall in line and beat the war drum. So President Kennedy rejected the plan, which included innocent Americans being shot dead on the streets. That's the only reason it didn't happen. Was Kennedy was good enough, at least at that time, and he said, no, we're not doing that. Boats carrying refugees fleeing Cuba to be sunk on the high seas, a wave of violent terrorism to be launched in Washington, D.C., Miami, and elsewhere, people being framed for bombings they did not commit, and planes being hijacked. I even heard, it doesn't say it in this part of this little story here that I read, but I've heard before that they actually had plans of hijacking planes and crashing them into high skyscrapers, kind of like 9/11. I don't know. And I'm not throwing 9/11 in here. That's a whole nother big ball of wax that we may get into in the future. But so what is all of this about? It's about programming. Political decisions, and frankly, any big decisions, are not made by you and only you. As it's been proven again and again and again, the moment you log into any social media, open a newspaper, look outside, or watch TV, your views are being manipulated by others. They even admit it. Even if you think you're above that, you're not. We've all speculated this, but we now know for a fact our decisions are being manipulated, and there's no way to stop that. And I just added this little note here. It reminds me of the movie They Live. If you've seen that movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was more like subliminal messaging, and Rowdy Roddy Piper would put on the They Live glasses, the sunglasses that he found, and he'd be able to see through, instead of whatever ice cream or whatever, instead of that it would say obey or something, right? It was just regular advertising out there on the road, and when he put the glasses on, he could see the truth. And if you haven't seen that movie, you really should go watch it, because although I don't agree that it's aliens or lizard people or anything like that, I just think it's evil people that are probably influenced by Satan, whether they know it or not, to do these evil things. So the last most important conspiracy theory of all time is the conspiracy theory about conspiracy theorists. In 1967, the CIA created the label conspiracy theorist. Did you know that? Because I've been looking into conspiracy theories for a long, long time, and I didn't know that until just 2 weeks ago. I came across this and I was just like, poof. Oh my God, it makes so much sense now. And that's part of the problem, is that it's after a while, these things start looking, there's a pattern to these things. So you can see this pattern and you're like, you can't really explain it for years and years. Then you figure out, yes, It's true. These people, these controllers, these elitists have been manipulating us all along. So in 1967, the CIA created the label conspiracy theorist to attack anyone who challenges the official narrative. That's what it's always been about since they created it. Now, they didn't actually create the term. They just weaponized it. They propagandized it against people. So before the fact checkers come in here and say, oh no, it was created in like 1869 by some author in some book, blah, blah, blah. That may be so. They didn't invent the term. All they did was take it and figure out, hey, we can weaponize this against people that are speaking out against us. And at the time, the Warren Commission was about to release their finding, or they just released their findings on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So conspiracy theorists used to be accepted, as normal democracy and free market capitalism were founded on conspiracy theories. Our whole system was founded on rebellion and conspiracy theories. So the Magna Carta, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and other founding Western documents were based on conspiracy theories. Greek democracy and free market capitalism were also based on conspiracy theories. But those were the bad old days, I guess. Things have changed now. The CIA coined the term conspiracy theorist in 1967. That all changed in the 60s. Specifically, in 1967, the CIA wrote a dispatch which coined the term conspiracy theories and recommended methods for discrediting such theories. The dispatch was marked Psych, short for psychological operations. Now they call it PSYOPs, or disinformation, and CS for the CIA's clandestine services unit. The dispatch was produced in response to a Freedom of Information Act request by the New York Times in 1976. And that's usually how it happens. They'll do this shit like 2 or 3 decades before, and then people start questioning it, going, hey, wait a minute. Maybe a couple whistleblowers come out and they're like, hey, wait a minute. We got some weird clandestine stuff going on here. That's just evil, and we shouldn't be doing this. And they're compelled to come forward to the press, right? Well, that's if Operation Mockingbird doesn't swat them down. And it's just, I can't believe this, guys. Again, I didn't know this till a couple weeks ago, so this one really kind of just put it all together for me, where I was just like, oh, okay. Now it totally makes sense why every mainstream media news outlet out there will use the term and the label conspiracy theorists as a slander against someone who's a free thinker, who's questioning the mainstream narrative. So, guys, don't be fooled by these people. They're liars. They're professional liars. They've figured out how to manipulate people through propaganda. You know, Hitler's guy, Goebbels, he openly said in a quote one time that he learned propaganda from the United States of America. That ought to shake you to the core when you see what they did, to the Jewish people. So, anyhow, guys, let me know what you think about all these down in the comments. Do you have another conspiracy theory that you've been studying or watching for years that has come true? I could have picked 10 more. This is unlimited supply of show content. So if you guys like this, let me know. We may do another one in the future. I stand for liberty. I hope you do too. And the reality is, one day standing for liberty may end up getting us all killed. But I think that's a good hill to die on. Appreciate you tuning in, stopping by. Hit the thumbs up if you like it. Share it if you like it, because otherwise YouTube ain't going to share this kind of stuff. They're part of Operation Mockingbird. So hang in there, guys. It's going to be a bumpy ride. We'll see you next time.